As a movement professional, it's my job to understand certain conditions within the body. And it always surprises me when I get a client who comes in with a condition called osteoporosis. And the reason I get surprised is because they are unaware of what it is and also specifically the things to avoid doing. There are many people that are walking around making their conditions worse simply because they haven't been told the information. So we're going to have a little chat today about this topic and some things for you to avoid in general. So firstly, osteoporosis is a condition that affects the bones of the body. Now, there are some particular bones we make reference to, but it can affect any of the bones. So the places that we're going to look at most or first is of the spine. Now, as I show you the spine here, because I've got my colorful spine, it's very easy to differentiate the segments. So the yellow bit is our cervical spine, the orange is our thoracic, and then the red is our lumbar spine. So we are going to pay attention to the thoracic spine here. Now, the bones at the front, they are our weight-bearing, the vertebral bodies, they are our weight-bearing portion of our spine. And when these bones become more porous, which is the porosis side of it, what happens is like little pockets of air start to come into the structure or the matrix of the bone, which doesn't make it super compact anymore. So when that happens, what ends up going on is that there becomes more curvature that is then available in the upper back. Now, we already have a slight curve in our spine by design, but when these bodies are no longer strong enough to hold our postural position up, we get that curvature coming forward. In contrast, then, what happens to be able to then see forward is our neck movement is going to go looking up, because our main aim is to keep our eyes level with the horizon. So what ends up happening is we have this forward curve coming in our upper back, then our neck and eyes are going to be tilted up so that we can keep looking forward. That can produce many uncomfortable symptoms around this area. When our bones are not compact anymore, they're more susceptible to things like fracture. So if we are doing something like a loaded movement of flexion, which is also known as rounding of the spine, I need you to move, I'm sorry. That would look like something coming from the floor, hands behind the head, and then curling your chest up. So your chest curl motion. It could also look like you standing up in gravity and then rolling yourself down towards your toes. So just putting a lot of load into the spine. So we want to avoid those type of things. The other movement that we want to avoid is excessive twisting. So it's okay to turn around and have a look at somebody behind you, or, if you're in your car and you're reversing and looking over a shoulder, that's not an issue. What we want to avoid is excessive twisting of your spine. So if I was sitting in our classical spine twist movement, I don't want to go into a forced twist of my spine doing this kind of action. We could, a little bit controversial, we could do our book openings as long as we're not going to our end range of movement, because it's still our goal to make sure that the body is moving in healthy function according to what we have available range of movement to do. So the third one that we want to avoid doing is a combination of the twist and the forward bend. So that could look something like this. We're not going to do something like a seated twist towards our legs in that way. So I mentioned that I have a lot of clients who come in who don't know these kind of things. A lot of them come from a yoga background. So doing things like, the forward bend, absolutely not. Things like doing the twist where we force ourselves around like that, absolutely not. These things are only going to make you feel worse in your movements. Now, some people will tell you that going over to the side bend, stretching through these parts of your vertebra like that, is also a limitation. So again, if you can just have a little drop of mindfulness that when you do these actions, you don't go to the end range of the movement. So me stretching my arm over, I am creating side bending, but that looks very different than me pushing all the way down toward the floor. All right, so those are going to be your most common moves that we want to avoid doing with an osteoporotic client. Now, I spoke first about what happens at the spine. Now we want to talk about things that happen at the leg. So if you were going to go and have a bone mineral density test, or also known as a DEXA scan, the way that we find out if you have osteoporosis is we're going to do a scan at the hip joint, the lumbar spine. We don't actually scan this part of the back. And then also the wrist. So these will be the common places that we would find out whether we've got demineralization happening of the bone. So again, if I bring my spine up a little higher, this would be my leg bone that sits into the pelvis like that. The area that we concern ourselves with is this portion here, which is called the neck of the femur. Now, in comparison to the other parts of the leg, it is a little bit less dense. So it's narrower and it's not as compact as the other parts of the bone. So yes, it's more vulnerable to that area. So the things that I want to avoid in this type of movement would be if I bring my leg up into the air unsupported and I try and do a full, oops, my spine's in the way. I try and do a full leg circle. So using gravity as the only support in my body, I want to avoid that type of movement. So end range of movement, unsupported structures. The other thing that we want to avoid is doing something like at an end range of extension, which is, not extension, external rotation. So moving my leg out in a clam position. So that just puts a lot of load into the joint at the hip. And also, some people put resistance bands around the legs and then forcing the knee up. If you're weak in this area, that's a very high chance that you're just going to keep stressing that bone out and start to get things like pain or potential fracture. All right, we're happy with that. And of course, if you were doing some exercises where you're really loading into the joint with, sometimes we do things on our tower bar with a spring up attached or a bar onto your leg and then bending the leg and stretching the leg. These things we just want to avoid. So a lot of the things that we think of can be useful of like just common sense, but if you don't know it, you don't know it, do you? All right, and then this last place we're going to take a look at is around our wrist area. So the bones of the wrist themselves, or the hand itself, or the bone that attaches here, which is called the radius. Now those areas are also a little bit more brittle, but as I mentioned, any bone in the body could be affected. So we want to avoid things like overly twisting through the wrists, and we want to have good mobility, but often what you'll find in a wrist issue is that someone will complain of pain during weight bearing and maybe think of it as arthritis. Now, it might not be arthritis. It might just be bad alignment, or it could be the start of something like osteoporosis. The unfortunate thing with osteoporosis is that it's named the silent disease, in which we say you don't really notice symptoms unless there's been a fracture. Often you're not even alerted to the fact that your bones are demineralizing until you've had a scan. Now, currently in Australia, that scan is only recommended at the age of 65 years, but you can actually request for a scan to be done earlier on so that you can have a better awareness of what is going on in your body. So I've spoken about some of the things that can be avoided for this condition. Let's talk about some of the things that we want to start to do to make you feel better. So as with everything in life, it's a little complicated. There's not just one thing that's going to make it better, because there's a succession of things that we have to look at in the body and in your lifestyle to make sure that we're doing things well. So the bad news is you want to start doing this as early as possible. So the minute you know you've got bones in your body, we're starting to do strengthening exercises, we're starting to eat well, we're making sure we've got enough sunshine, protein, calcium, sleep, minimizing our stress, minimizing alcohol, minimizing sugar and processed foods. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a lot to handle. But let's talk about, from a movement perspective, what we're going to do. So if my spine is wanting to be in this shape, or if this is what's happening to my body because of what's going on in my bones, would it make sense then that we want to then open that space up? So in our Pilates sessions, we focus a lot on opening the front of the chest. We can do that in a sitting exercise where we're focusing on our posture, maybe having something to hold again so that it can help you be more organized and upright. We do a lot of work of lifting the front of the body away from the floor. So if I was lying down like so, and then peeling the spine up into an extension and down. Now, if I had a client who was overly curved, that might not be the best exercise for them to then come up, because I'm going to be creating more of that neck lift rather than the actual spine lift. So we have very creative ways that we move through a Pilates studio in order to support your body in whatever phase and shape it's in. Another thing to think about doing is, if you are more prone to osteoporosis, we want to protect the other bones as well. So if you are going to lie on your front, like that's what we want to do, is open the chest up, we might put a towel underneath the rib cage just to soften the blow or the impact that could be happening from gravitational forces pushing down onto the mat. We love using little soft balls behind the back of the shoulders to open your chest up toward the ceiling. Now, you may think I'm going to sort of contradict myself, but if I'm in an arched position like that and I then roll my head and chest forward, that looks like the contraindicated movement I said in the beginning, which is don't round your spine, but it's not as severe. So I can do that motion coupled with the extension. I'm just not creating so much force down into the front of the body. Wherever possible, we want to work on finding a place to support for example, our leg again or our hand. So we're always going to look at alignment issues. Now, I know that was just more of a tutorial today. I will link a video that I have here to create strong building bones, which is osteoporosis safe to do. So if you're looking for a class, then you can follow along with that. And I will be sharing more about these kind of things and more classes coming up soon. Have a great day.